Hey guys, James Justice here. I've got sitting here with David Montelongo, and
What's up, James?
we're just going to continue talking about what we have going on. And David and I are partners in a real estate development project here. We're calling it Urban Elevations Group here in San Antonio area. We're buying lots, and we're going to put duplexes and triplexes on them, and possibly more types of buildings on these lots. But we're purchasing lots, and Dave's going to talk a little bit about these lots and the development of the lots and some of these buildings that we're going to be placing on them, and just going through the process of it, some of the things that we're finding out throughout the process, and bring you guys along to where we're at now. So David, let's talk about this first one that we have going on. Currently we have 6 lots in the San Antonio area, pretty close to downtown. This first one on Rivas Street, we were just there today looking at the lot. We just surveyed it. Tell us kind of about developing it, where we're at right now, and how you see the next couple months going.
Well, first of all, it's kind of an interesting story. This morning, right? Like when we actually already had the lot surveyed when we purchased it. I think this one was one of the first lots that we purchased together in December, and we had it surveyed at the time prior to our closing, and we went out. We've made all this progress, and we'll talk about the steps that we've taken, but made all this progress to get to this point that we're at now, and we went to go, we're getting ready to start foundation. We can't find our markers, right? We can't find our pins. We can't find, we've had everything surveyed, but nothing's apparent as far as like where where our property lines or anything like that. And so last time we were out there, we had a neighbor, somebody came by. We learned his name today. What's his name?
Oh, Rudy. Yeah.
Rudy. And so Rudy came by. We might have to. There's multiple Rudys in these stories, so we'll have to distinguish.
Rudy number one.
Rudy number one. And anyways, Rudy says that our next door neighbor, it's another vacant lot next door, but that neighbor's fence actually it's on our property line, but his fence that he thinks is his sits like 9.5 feet into our property. So we kind of think he went out and, disturbed the pins, so we couldn't really see where the property lines were and things like that. At least that's what Rudy is alluding to when he's telling us that. So anyways, we're getting ready to get started out there. So we had the survey company back out, had them clearly marked today where the pins are, and kind of recorded it for our purposes as well. So that in case it goes, these pins go missing again, we'll know how to find them.
Yeah. I think what'll be interesting is to maybe show people kind of what the lots are and where they're at. I mean, there's gonna be a lot of people to listen that are in the San Antonio area that kind of know some of these neighborhoods. I mean, the lots that we're buying are not necessarily in like the best parts of town. I would say, just to give you guys a range of the lots that we're purchasing, they're between $15,000 and $36,000 in a little bit of a different area that's a little bit, maybe a little bit more valuable in a certain part of town. But, they're in some kind of rougher parts of town, right, David? And so, and this particular lot is adjoined. I mean, it has a certain address, 1232. And then there's next to it, there's a double lot that's also 1232. There was buildings that were sitting on there, years past, like in the 50s. So the title work and all that, and then the surveying, making sure that you're in the right spot. We got a notice. The reason that we were out there last week was we got a notice from the city that said that we had to go mow it and clean it up. So there, even though we bought these lots, there's already some maintenance going on with these lots. But that's when we were trying to figure out, looking at the survey and looking at the using Zillow to kind of just figure out, where is this lot? What do we even own here? Where, where's we had a survey done recently, like you said, but the markers were gone, the pins were gone. And we found out that, we couldn't even really tell where our lot was that we had just bought, 3 months ago.
Yeah.
So,
and there's a huge, so the fence, this neighbor's fence is now on our lot. So 9.5 feet into our lot with a huge log. It's not like just a log. It's like half a tree. I mean, the diameter of that thing is like that. It must be
we were going to put it in the back of your truck, but obviously that's not going to work.
Probably a 500-pound half a tree. Anyway, so that he's going to get all that stuff out of the way, because it's pretty much right where the foundation sits of the property. And so we're getting prepped and all ready for that. But the reason why, where you brought up a good point, you're saying that they're in the older neighborhoods and little rougher parts of town. But when you think about it, it's really close to where the city started. Like when you look at what we're buying, so we have lots on the west side, and we have lots on the east side. But when you look at it in relation to the city, when the city started, it had this little piece of city, and it grows out right to what it is today. But in the early days, all of these lots around the center of the city, they weren't plot. We found out is that they weren't plotted. They weren't originally plotted. So now, like if you buy a lot, in a new area, you're gonna have an engineer do a plat. They submit that plat to the city, then it goes together with the city plat, and it's recorded for forever. But they didn't used to do that back in the day. So like this lot that we're getting ready to start building on, we found out from one of the neighbors, this was a plumbing shop back in the day. And so it was zoned business slash MF33. This particular lot was business slash MF33, something to that effect. But the important part to us was that it's zoned and recognized by the city as MF33. We kind of went back through that this morning in our conversation, how that's super important, like for what we're doing for building these inner city lots, because we can put multiple units on them with that particular zoning, right? And we don't have to go through the rezone process, all that stuff.
Yeah, what does MF33 mean? You had to educate me on that the other day.
Yeah, so basically MF33 is you can put 33 acres per, 33 units per acre. So, an acre is 43,560 square feet, I think it is, right? So when you take the dimensions of our lots, the lots that we're building are small. I think one of them, I think Rivas is 0.059 of an acre. And so when you calculate that out, it's about 2 units basically, or a duplex, and you can round up, you use basic rounding. So if it's, 1.6, you round up. If it's 1.4, you round down, right. So, anyway, so on this particular lot, we can put a duplex on it. So far we've got a couple of we've got several duplex lots and 2 triplex lots. So in the mix of what we have.
Yeah, in our plan, David, we came up with this last year. We were talking about doing different things together. We told you that in the last episode. We were talking about how you and I came upon each other and how we wanted to get into business together. But this plan to do Urban Elevations Group kind of morphed over, probably the last year or two that we've been talking. And so buying, these vacant lots, they're vacant. I mean, there's at least right now, there's nothing on them. They might have had some old buildings before the city tore whatever was down there, or somebody tore it down. Every once in a while, we'll go on these lots and we'll see little bits of slab, that might have been a porch or something like that. But they're in essence, they're basically vacant lots. There's really nothing on them. They're zoned MF33, so multifamily with the 33 designation on it from the city of San Antonio, or the county, Bexar County in this case. And we're going to build new structures on them, from the slab up, slab on grade. We have a designer that's we'll share some of these with you as we go through the process and build this first one. But it's basically, David, we talked about doing fix and flips. You've done a bunch of those. You've shown me some of the fix and flips. We talked about getting into some of them last year, and we just kind of, for some reason, didn't jump out. The ones that we looked at didn't jump out as good deals for us. I know that you've kind of moved away a little bit from the fix and flip. We talked about doing these new construction buildings. Go into that a little bit in your mind, in your thought process, what's gotten you to this point with Urban Elevations.
Yeah. The big challenge for me with obviously, if you find the right deals, and I think coming up, there might some more better fix and flip deals might become available, just because of the current, things, the way they are, and where the economics of things are going to go. But what we've seen over the last several years is the market's been so strong. The real estate market's been so strong, specifically, across the U.S., but specifically here in Texas and San Antonio, has just been so strong that the prices just keep going up and up. So it's tough to buy something, cheap enough to where you can put the money that's needed to fix it properly and put it on the market and get max value for it. So, like the deals that we see coming across the desk so many times are marginal. And so I do a lot of remodeling anyways, because my main construction business with home remodeling, but these are for folks that are living there and they're willing to make the investment to do things, right and all that. And so the deals just seem to get slimmer on the fix and flip deals. And so we just kind of modified that concept, you and I, through our conversation, and said, okay, well, if we buy a vacant lot, and we hired a builder to go out and build this, what's it going to cost us? And then if we were to build it, contract it ourselves, what's that going to cost us? And, can we potentially build a ton of equity in this small apartment building just by handling the construction ourselves? And so that's the route that we've gone to start with. And so, we've taken that approach from the beginning. So, pretty much taking all these little steps along the way, everything from hiring the designer, having the design meetings, through hiring the engineer, having the foundation and framing plans engineered, moving into the permit phase of things. And then, like we're hiring trades directly. So right now we're interviewing, actually we've already taken bids through this process, but we're interviewing foundation guys, since that's what's up next, or what's up first. We've got to make that call. So we're doing that. We're reviewing that. Whereas if we hired a contractor, right, then we're just going to leave that to them. And there may be a point in time, I think, when the projects maybe get larger, more units, something like that, that may start to make sense. But for right now, as we roll this kind of strategy out, we want to keep a pulse on it. Obviously, for you and I, we've talked about like the quicker we can get these built and tenants in, get the properties leased up, the properties are cash flowing, that puts us in a better spot. So obviously we want to do that. If we hire a builder, we're gonna kind of hand that responsibility off, and if they're busy or they've got multiple projects or we're not at the top of the priority list, I mean, that our timeframes could be affected. So for right now, we're choosing to do that directly, so that we can kind of control timeframes and budgets and make sure that we build the equity into the project that we're looking for.
Yeah. So we've had this lot now. This is the first one that we bought towards the end of last year. We bought it. We put it into a Series LLC that we really believe in. As far as all of our lots are now in a Series LLC. So we have an LLC that we formed with kind of an umbrella type of organization. Like we have our company that owns these Series LLCs, and each one of our lots and each one of our properties, eventually when they're built, are going to be in the Series LLC, and that really protects us from liability. So it's not our names necessarily directly associated with it. For if anything happens, we're responsible people, but we can't control everything. So we have them in a Series LLC. We've hired. We have a relationship with he's not an architect, but he draws plans for us. He's really good, and he drew plans for this particular building. It's a duplex. It is each side is roughly 800 square feet. They sit next to each other side by side. There's what they call like a party wall in the middle of it, right, that separate the two.
Right.
Living area downstairs. So each one of them has a downstairs, upstairs, but it's not split level. The downstairs and upstairs is separated for each one on its own. So living area downstairs with a powder bath and kitchen, and then upstairs is 2 bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs. So that's kind of the layout of these, at least this duplex and the triplex that we're going to build next, which is coming up soon. Right after we start this one, will be similar, but with 3 units that look a little bit similar. What's the style that you really like that you would call these, David, as far as the architectural style on these?
I mean, I think we were trying to go with an edge of modern when we started going down the path, the path. But I think if you go like true modern, it can get kind of expensive, because we're talking about maybe a stucco or a full masonry exterior with maybe some steel or just different things like that. I mean, possibly polished concrete on the inside. And for for rental units and things like that, we don't want to go overboard. But I think that the concept overall started off kind of modern. I think you and I both kind of like that modern, kind of more modern feel. But then incorporating some other, like on the exterior, we're going to do some interesting stuff. Like I think we're on the same page with doing the black framed windows on the exterior. And so for me, that's something like that's different. They're vinyl windows, they're energy efficient, they're good, but they're black frame. I saw, I think we looked at some pictures of projects like that. It looks a little more modern, looks interesting. Also the Hardy, that's the batten board style Hardy on portions of the building, to kind of give it a nice kind of look and feel. And and then it was your idea about not putting, unit A over B, but making each individual unit, upstairs, downstairs. And I like that because um, I think like living in an apartment type situation, you're going to feel more like it's your home if you've got your upstairs and downstairs in one unit rather than having somebody up above you or having to worry about being quiet because you've got somebody down below you. I think that's a perk. I like that portion of what we're doing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've talked about that quite a bit as to just little things like that make things more desirable. I mean, who wants to, I mean, I guess the person on the first floor is great. They don't have to move any furniture or anything or climb stairs, but then they're going to hear the people upstairs all day long, whatever they're doing up there. So there's really advantages, disadvantages, but really, I think that we decided that we wanted the downstairs and upstairs to be in the same unit and just be divided by, a thick wall that is insulated based on the city code and everything. So yeah, I mean, it's they're all. I think that the modern element is what we're shooting for. I do think that's a trend that's coming to San Antonio. I mean, you see it a lot, different parts of the country. You see it a lot in Austin now. When you drive around, you see a lot of the modern style, metal type, types of materials being used, corrugated metal on the outside, different types of woods that are also used, some angular type buildings. The difficulty in that is, and I've seen some single family homes around here, and they tend to sell at a premium because they're designed in a certain way, and I think they're desirable. Has a little bit of that European element, I think, which we're shooting for also. But I guess the downside of that is it can be more expensive to build, right? I mean, using different materials and methods that maybe not everybody's, not your average framer and your average cornice man might not know, right? As far as in your experience, what do
Yeah,
you
it's
think
good.
about that?
Yeah, I mean, you see a lot of that coming. You're right. You see a lot of that coming in down, like especially like in Dignity and on the east side. So our properties on the east side are not in Dignity; they're just east of Dignity. But all throughout there, you've got that modern feel, and then you've got like a real classic look mixed with the modern, and lots of that different type of thing. Yeah, obviously, like the cool metals on the outside and the different features architectural features that you can do make the property look really sharp and amazing. And I'm about that, because my other construction business, I'm about like the style of things and making things like really slick. But we're also looking at it from an investment perspective, right? And so how much are we willing to invest in this where it makes sense, where we're cash flowing properties and things like that. So we want to make them nice, but we don't want to go, we're going to keep these properties, we're going to rent them. So we don't want to go overboard with, design elements that are going to, take our budget higher than what it needs to be. And then, overall affect the cash flow of the project. So yeah, definitely if you're, you've got your building in your structure, your box with a roof, and siding and windows, and you can put some things on it to a nice curb appeal. But when you start adding metals and stones and different things, and you get too cheeky with it, like you can run up the bill pretty fast. So we're keeping an eye on that for sure.
Yeah, let's talk about this first project. I mean, we're talking about the lot and the construction on it. Let's call it about a $200,000 project.
Yeah.
Our cost on this deal. And so, we've done some modeling for all of our different projects that we're doing, the duplexes, the triplexes. And our goal is really to, at least for right now, we're building these. We're using, David, your construction company, Sunrise, to build these really at cost. I mean, there's really no markup in anything that you're doing, because
Right.
we're going to keep these as rental units. But what we've seen and what the modeling shows us is that, when you rent these out, you keep it, you rent them out over a course of maybe 4 to 5 years. That's really when you see some really huge gains. There's some appreciation in these areas that we're looking at. The lots appreciating, the buildings appreciating. so, if that continues as a trend here in this area of the country anyway, um, and then what's really strong is the rental income on those. There's some other, benefits to having these as an investment property for people. We can talk about that as we kind of go into some of the more specifics and different episodes of this. But there's some tax reasons. There's some really big tax benefits to owning rental investment properties like that. We can go into some details later, but that's really what we're talking about is building these. This one's a duplex, probably about 200,000. Triplex is going to be more like 280, say, to build it. Pretty good rentals. I mean, we're talk about what do you think those are going to rent for?
Well, they're going to rent different on the west side than they're going to rent on the east side. But on the west side, I believe that we've predicted around $1,100 a month per side. But I've actually seen since I think we kind of predicted that, I've actually seen some higher rents than that. I believe the last time we were looking, we saw around 1,250, almost 1,300 for some of those units on that area of town. It'll be interesting to see what rents do here over the next few months with people's work situation being altered and all that sort of thing. So we'll see how the rents go. But at full bore right now, we think somewhere between $1,200 and $1,300 on that rent. And on the east side, we're talking more probably $1,300 to $1,600 on those units for a similar sized unit. And I was actually so we had an investor that we met with one day, prior to us, getting too far along with this. I went to an investor meeting and was sharing. The lady actually worked for CoStar, the big, basically research company that provides information for commercial brokers and things like that. And so I believe she does training for people, and for her clients. Basically, she goes into their office and trains them to use CoStar. So anyway, she's very, met with her at her office. She had multiple screens set up and pulled everything up, and we're just kind of going through things. And she loves the area. She was all about the area from the time that she heard about it, just because of where it sits, just there east of Dinwiddie and how strong the property values are, and, have been going up and rents are good. But we talked about that, and I told her, $1,300 to $1,600, and she was floored by that. She didn't think that was possible at all. I think she was thinking more like in the 900 range. And so she started pulling everything up on her multiple screens and everything. And, she was pulling up everything from 13 to, up on slightly over $1,600 for a similar sized unit and everything. So, and then both areas of town that we're focused on, both the west and the east side, the east side's for sure, the east side's booming. I mean, there's all kinds of, development, redevelopment, tear down, rebuild, major renovations of all types of different things, plus big apartment complexes, high-end mixed-use developments. I mean, like the east side's really has been going strong. The west side has been slower in that regard, but at our property that we're building, now just around the corner, we've got that nice apartment complex that's going up. The city's doing things to develop, there's I think the creek there is called Alizon Creek. And so the city's doing things to improve the creek and putting bike and hike and bike trails or walking trails down there. So they're doing things to bring up the area. So for me, that's and we've talked, that's pretty strong points for both areas.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not from San Antonio, David. I've been here about 7 years. I mean, you grew up here, you're known for, your family's been in the business a long time. You know the area well. You've been in construction for basically your whole life, really. I know your dad was involved in it. And so, the market pretty well. I mean, the market as far as the fix and flips, you've done a bunch of those. I mean, I remember when you first described some of these areas to me, even though I'd been here for, 7 years, I didn't really know where you were talking about. I was like, well, I know where I live, but I also know I know that where I live, where the lots are, $300,000, you're not going to buy a lot and build on it and really make any money in certain, it's not as lucrative, I think, when you have to pay that much for a lot, unless you're doing a certain thing to it. You're building an expensive single family home on it. And these lots here anyway aren't zoned multifamily anyway, right? So you had a very specific, I think, in your mind when we first started talking and you approached me about this plan. you had a very specific idea, about where and what you were looking for. These areas that we're talking about right now, you call it Dignity Park, or Dignity area of San Antonio. That's a little bit probably more appealing than the one that we're doing right now, and on Zarzamora area, kind of near Our Lady of the Lake University. If anybody is from San Antonio knows that area. The east side you're talking about is kind of it's how far from downtown would you say that is, and where is that really located between downtown and like the AT&T Center in your mind?
So the AT&T Center is east of where we're at. So like if you're where the major intersections cross is I-37 and is it I-35? I-37, I-35
Yeah,
cross each other right there. And on the
yeah,
left corner, you have the Pearl. The opposite corner of the Pearl is Dignity, basically this neighborhood that we're discussing, and we're just slightly east of Dignity.
yeah,
So very close to the Alamo Dome, all that area over there. And, George Gervin's doing a major redevelopment project over there, adding on to the school that's already over there and everything. So, and this other, I believe it's called Essex, is a huge development going on over there. So yeah, a lot of things going on in that area. And the thing about it is it's urban, right? We're calling it urban infill because there's nothing on these lots, and so we're putting structures on these lots. And there's only, I mean, when you look on the MLS, like we search the MLS all the time for these different lots that are available. There's only a handful of them available at a time. There's a bunch out there. Well, probably not. I mean, it's limited, right? There's only a limited supply of them, but there's more out there. It just has to be, you just got to find them. But they're close to the downtown area because that's just how they were zoned many years ago. And like we talked about this, like you can go through the process of rezoning, but where else in the city are you gonna, if you wanted to build a newer area of the city, you wouldn't do it for just one lot. Like, it would be a development. You'd have to go in and buy a whole section of land and develop that whole land, plat that whole land and everything. And then you could put, some of the lots in there, make them MF33 lots, right? This is nice because that takes a lot of time. This is nice because if you find them, they're already like that. You can go through the permit process and do all of that, which I'm playing that down a little bit like it's easy, but there's actually a lot to it. There's a lot of steps along the way. And I think probably on one of our future, I actually have those, we'll like build out those steps because for folks that are interested in doing that out there. What I would say is it's more difficult than a fix and flip on the front end, but way easier once you start construction. I think that's I think that's the main difference for me. I think you asked that question and I didn't give my full reply on that earlier, but that's the thing for me, like a fix and flip, you can basically walk, if you buy a property, next day you can walk into the city, fill out a permit application, tell them what you're going to do. They issue you a permit and you're on the road. Next day you're building, you're doing your demo and doing your project.
right.
It's different with a lot. I mean, we had to get a permanent address, for the lot. And I mean, it's just many steps to get to this point. But then, we develop out our budget. But then when we build, we know that the concrete's going to cost what it costs. We know that the electrical is going to cost what it costs. The plumbing, every part and component of the project, we know what we're going to spend on it. Whereas, if you're doing a fix and flip, it's real easy to get in the middle of the fix and flip and figure out that it was not what you were thinking. There's termite damage, there's busted pipes, there's, any number of things that you might find on a flip project.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a learning experience for me. We're buying the lots, and it goes through a standard, purchasing with the title company and all that. And they do their due diligence on the title, and they give you title insurance and all that. And then you get a survey, right? And to me, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, the survey tells me pretty much everything, but there's so much more to these lots. There's so much more that has to go through the city and get permitted and all these things. So it's amazing. You'll see people buy flip houses, and then, like you said, a week later, they're in there tearing it up, right? I mean, there's permits already sent, they tape the permits onto the window. It takes a couple of days to get that done. But this is totally different. It has to go through an approval process. The plans have to go in, and even the plans, the plans are pretty elaborate. they have to be certified, and they have to be engineered. And so there's a lot to that. Now, one thing that surprises me about, I wanted to make a point before I lost it, is, it's funny, you'll drive around, you'll see these lots, and we purchased some of these, I call them vacant lots, I guess. There's really no buildings on them. But I mean, next door, you'll see, a 1940s house for sale that's sitting on the same size lot, and they want basically double or triple the amount for that house, which is a tear down in my mind. There's really nothing you can do with that house, and it's going to cost you to tear it down. Why do you think that these vacant lots are, so much less? I mean, they're not cheap. We're paying, what I think they're worth. We're getting deals when we can, but why would a junk house on the same lot why would somebody value that so much more?
I actually called on one of the houses the other day just down the street. And the lady who owned it was a little old lady that owned it, and she was selling it by way of owner finance. But she was a very shrewd older lady. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was getting her down payment. She was getting her monthly payment. She's getting her interest. And for a lot of families, like in lower income areas, they make their money in different ways. Like, they might work construction, and maybe they're not, papered up all the way. Maybe they have cash. So, a family like that, they'll go in, they'll buy. It looks like the guy who owns the house on the corner is like, I think it's probably the nicest house on the street there. He's completely redone that thing. It's got new siding. It had a new back porch. It's all painted up. It looks, nice and fresh and everything. But, he's a carpenter. We saw him pull away the other day, and he's got, a truck full of lumber, and he's going to work. So that's why I think a lot of what you find in those areas, like if somebody sells a rundown, or what, you and I might call a rundown piece of property, for somebody who might want to live there and give them $5,000 down and make a $500 or $600 payment a month. That's, for them, it might be really valuable. So like, I think that lady was asking, I think it was a 3-1, but it was tiny, a tiny little house. And she was asking 75,000 for it.
Right. Right. So the lot was maybe worth what, 25 or 30?
I mean, yeah. Yeah.
So that's interesting. So in my mind, it's a tear down. I'd be looking to tear it down and build something on it. But for somebody else, they would live in it. And so to them, somebody, they're buying a livable structure for 75,000 or something like that. So it depends on what you're going to do with it and what your view is and that kind of thing. So that makes sense.
We've actually, through this process, when we were looking for the lots, we actually were offered a few tear down properties. But the challenge is, and this is something you have to, if somebody else is looking at this type of strategy for the first time, the challenge is if you buy a piece of property, and let's say, like, I think these lots over here, well, let's just use an average. We've paid between as low as 12, and we've paid as much as like 36,000, right? So let's just say you pay $20,000 for a lot. And if that lot has a structure on it, you're for sure going to pay, $10,000 to $15,000 to have that structure removed, because trash is not cheap. It's expensive to haul all that trash off.
Yeah.
And then you got to hire a machine operator out there to tear it down and everything. So if you can find one that's actually truly vacant, in my opinion, unless you're just getting it dirt cheap, they're basically giving you the lot, in the house. But the thing is that people rarely give you a lot with a house on it, because then it has this perceived value, right?
Right.
So it's easier to get a lot with nothing on it for a reasonable price than it is to get a lot with a house that somebody's saying needs to be teared down.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what we're doing, is we're buying, lots that don't have anything on them. If somebody were to offer us a lot that had something on it, and it was, the same price, or it almost have to be less, for us to act on it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, you'd have to discount it, that the cost of whatever we think the demolition is going to be. We'd have to discount that and pay that for it, right? And so that's even harder to get to.
It just depends on what part of town I think you're in when you're talking about lot values and existing structures and that kind of thing. But there is so much involved with the city, and I think we're going to go into that. And also talk about the financing. Let's talk about your budget, though, David. I'm curious. I know that you put together a full budget for the construction. I mean, we've got everything in there, line item in there. I'm always amazed, David. You've done some work for me before. That's how we met. I'm always amazed at how accurate your budgets are. But you're really how does that budget come together from the very beginning? We bought the lot, it's just sitting there. We're going to put a building on it. How do you develop that budget?
Well, so the way that I start is I have a budget template that I've been using and building on for years. And we actually used to use that budget template back when I was with my family business before I went out on my own. And I met with my brother that developed it. Him and I, got together about 6 months ago and revised that budget for a project that we were looking at together. And so we've updated it through the years and everything. And there's all these different categories for everything that you might need for a large build or renovation project. So I start with that. And I just start going through, the foundation, the frame, and I do estimate it, just because, like if I'm going to you and I say, hey James, let's do this project, I think it's gonna cost us $150,000 to build this. I need to give you something to substantiate that. So, and if I bring that to you, you're gonna look at it and you're gonna know that we don't have plans yet. You're gonna know that there's gonna be some movement in that budget, but we need to be close enough to even know if it's going to make sense for us to go down that path, right? So I try to, I've just done that, and I do that with every budget I get. If a new customer I get, anything, I always try to estimate it myself first before I take it out and hard bid it. And
Okay.
then once it's feasible, like it's like, okay, this makes sense, and I even do that for customers. Like many times a customer will ask me for a remodel, and if it's a large remodel, and I look at what their house value is, what it's going to be worth afterwards. So I've even told customers, hey, you know what, this doesn't really make sense for your neighborhood for you to spend this kind of money on your house.
Right.
And so, I do take the same approach with it. Okay, does this even make sense? Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, let's take it to the next level. Let's have, our designer do a conceptual design for us. And so we kind of phase out our investments. It's not like, okay, let's go spend $4,000 having a set of plans drawn. It's like, okay, let's go spend $800 or $900 for a concept. And if we like that concept, then I can usually take that concept and go back through my budget and revise things further, right? And during that whole process, during that whole time, once I have that concept, I can be visiting with the concrete guys and the frame guys and the electricians and plumbers and having them help me put numbers together and verifying what I've already estimated. And so by the time we get to final construction drawings, I'm already, the budget's very tight. So we're very close to where what our final actual build number is going to be.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen it kind of go through the process, and I've seen you go through the process with this particular project. And it is kind of a process, right? You start off with some, you have a lot of experience with different, all the different trades, what everything in your mind, what things cost more or less. But I've never seen you quote something specific without really knowing. And I think that's smart. You will get hard bids from all of the contractors when it comes time to really put the final budget together. The pre-construction budget, I guess you'd call it. Those are really hard bids from contractors. And so, I see how you started off with kind of this overall number, maybe a square foot price. Everybody wants to know what's the square foot price to build certain things, but that's just not really, it's not accurate, I think, unless you have, in the end, you have hard numbers from people, because you don't know, and things change, right?
Yeah.
Labor costs change, building materials change, and, so you don't really know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's, like finishes, like what goes in, what's going to go into the project. That's a big difference. The type of countertops, type of cabinets, like, floor finishes. I think all those things matter and make a difference. But that probably leads into some finance stuff that we might get into on a next episode. We can talk a little bit further about budgets and how it's relating to the financing that we're using on this particular project.
Yeah. I think we'll talk more about the project, how it's coming along, and then I think the financing is really a key part of this. How you're going to build this. Whether you're using like a HELOC, construction loan. We could talk about all the different options and what we're doing, and lay those out for people to kind of see what different ways are to build these and finance them. So yeah, great conversation, David.
Yeah,
I enjoy talking to you, and really every time I talk to you, even though we're around each other quite a bit, always learn a little bit from your experience and our discussions together.
nice. All right, well, good combo, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks,
Okay.
David.
You got it.
Thanks, everybody.